Jacinta.
I think for discrete communities, part of what's important is knowing who you are. It's about the identity of your community, and that can be who you are as an economy. You know, what makes our city, Warrnambool, tick? You know, how's it sliced up, and how's it moving? And some of that information that I gave before was available because of a conscious decision of our council to spend some time and energy in understanding what's happening in the economy in our city, but also some time and energy in engaging our community as well. And people can then vote and participate in a whole range of ways, not just voting. Voting's not the only form of democracy. So the other side of your question, Peter, about governance, in regional communities, there's proportionately less people with governance qualifications, and it's been sensational to bring the Australian Institute of Company Directors down to Warrnambool in our region, and there are, over the last, say, 6 to 8 years, more and more people in our region with a range of different governance qualifications. And the change in thinking and visioning in our community about our aspirations as a city is starting to show because of that alone. So it's a worthwhile investment.
Thanks, Jacinta. Further comment, or should we move on to the next question?
I actually don't want to talk about the governance so much as behind Peter's comment, I think, is the propensity we have for putting band-aids on things. We have a foundation, and then we want to change it, so we just put something more on and put something more on, instead of realising that we're in a different era and we can put a different lens on this and starting de novo. Now, that may be an issue that the public won't allow it, but if so, then it comes back to that communication. Why would we be doing it, and what's the outcome we're seeking?
So that's an interesting point about the more fundamental aspects, and you referred earlier to the great unwashed. Is that us when we're outside this room?
Take your pick.
And is your audience, Emily, are they the great unwashed or are they the washed?
That's a cliche, Steve.
Of course it is.
I think they're incredible. I mean, they're all university educated, or not everyone, but you know, like, and incredibly passionate about their world. So, washed or unwashed, I don't really care. I just want them to be excited about being involved.
But are we having abstract discussions in high-level places amongst a few elites about these issues, or is it real out there?
I think it's real, but I think it manifests in a slightly different way to, you know, these kinds of conversations, and that's okay too. And in fact, the diversity is exactly what's required, and that's why I think, you know, when I look at the guys and the way they play their own identities and the way they kind of point fun and also kind of make it confronting, I actually think, you know, art is about the role of art is often because it can use the arsenal of the subconscious to articulate things we don't understand. And so that's I think, where in all of this, culture and art and it comes in, because there aren't always words or actions that are good enough for the complexity of what we need as interpersonal relations. And we had a fantastic speaker within our lunchtime, I think your name's Tim, who really did quite strongly advocate for culture being one of the most important things that we can get a grip on in trying to understand each other. And I think that's where artistic practice comes in, because it uses those unknowable, unmentionable, it uses the tools of the feelings, and that's actually incredibly important.
Thanks. Peter Kronborg, then I'll throw back to you, Jacqueline, for a closing comment.
I think we shouldn't forget, as Greg just mentioned, that we've got such a finely balanced democracy. It sometimes is forgotten that it's a joy and a jewel to hold in our society and in the world. But Greg, I just wonder if you've given much thought, as you have to the plebiscite model, to also some reconstruction of the question time in federal parliament. Because there's no one who goes to federal parliament who isn't somewhat embarrassed when they're observing the mosh pit that goes on all too often. And it sets the scene for our society, and we've become very adversarial. This gathering today is wonderful to see the discussions carried on in the mature way that they are, in a round table format, without that adversarial pitch going on. So my question for the panel, can we reinvent from the top? Just as Don Argus kept on looking at his board and saying, how can I make it better? How can I ask the rest of the organisation to improve if I don't look at our own board? Can we look at Parliament and see if there's ways of improving it? And I'd be interested if anyone else has a view on it as well. And I appreciate the digital inclusion model that may be part of it.
Thank you. Quick response from all the panel and then Jacqueline. Greg, go first.
Okay. Look, the first thing is, let me just be brief in putting it in context. Question time that appears on television shows the roughest 20 seconds of the roughest hour of, often a 12-hour day of debate. For most of those 12 hours, much of what's said on the floor of the Parliament is very conciliatory. The vast majority of bills go through without conflict. Well over 85% of bills tend to go through without a vote or a division and with bipartisan support. By nature, question time is the moment where the disagreements are brought about. It is designed, it's structured for the purpose of holding the government of the day accountable. That's its structure, its purpose. Can it be better? Absolutely. I think the British question time is far better than the Australian question time. And that's about that's about two elements. That's about the standing orders and the rules in terms of the time for giving and the time for giving questions and the time for answering, but it's also about the culture. Both the questions and the answers are remarkably factual. So I can take that on board as a personal goal. I won't pledge perfection either in terms of objective or outcome, but it's a fair point. The British question time, though, is clearly, I think, a superior forum in real terms. And then the other thing is, where can you get genuine bipartisanship? And I think it is by adopting specific projects on which that can be achieved. A new deal for Indigenous Australia, the National Disability Insurance Scheme. These are the sorts of things where you can actually do it. So you do it project by project. The nature of a contestable system is there will be conflict, but you've got to look for the points and the means, and that's why my starting point was to suggest these long-term planning commissions where people can jointly operate and design the 30, the 50, even the 100-year vision outside of the parliamentary bubble.
Thanks, Greg. Elaine.
The words respect, we've heard it around the tables today, and I think our public want to be respected, but in turn they also want to respect our leaders.
Thank you.
I think it'd really help if the nature of who was in Parliament reflected contemporary Australian society. So I think we really do need to think about who stands for Parliament and how we get a greater cultural diversity and a diversity of abilities and gender diversity into those positions. I'm not pretending that that's an easy question, but it will definitely help us understand our global position if we're more robustly doing that in a home. It's interesting to me. I went to Sydney University. I was quite involved with the union there, and the people that I was being board secretary for at that time are popping up all over the place at the moment, and will go on in the same way that Tony Abbott did to become leaders. And it's kind of strange to see your peers do that. It's wonderful, but it still makes me go, well, what did it take for me to get to Sydney University, and what kind of privileged environment was that, and who did I meet? Well, I'm culturally yes, but it was. I think we've got to start at every level thinking about how our leaders are going to be grown.
Thanks. Jacinta.
I think the whole notion of respect is definitely central. I think at state and federal level, parliamentary participants become a bit desensitised to the circus of question time, and I think that it would probably be better if they were a bit more sensitive. It really is a bit like a school class, and I know it's a part of a game that's played out for the media, but even at the local council level, which I'm obviously involved with, I think you have to earn the respect and not exploit the position of privilege that you're in by using the media for petty point scoring, because it undermines the strength of your community's confidence in what you can do. And so I think, you know, I've watched a lot of Question Times, and I do feel uncomfortable, and I know that at local government level we have some similar things as well. But I think it's more important to stick to the main game and engage genuinely with the community rather than to sort of play this other game that's not even relevant. It's sort of out there.
Thank you. And Jacqueline, to give us a summary close of our panel.
Thanks so much to all of our panellists today for joining us in this discussion, and thank you for your questions here. I think what we have is a great diversity of discourses, which is what the Global Foundation, I think, is very good at bringing together. The Global Foundation doesn't aim to provide answers to these questions, but rather aims to provide a forum for posing more questions and engendering more discussion. So on the one hand, we have a project-by-project kind of approach to improving citizen empowerment and engagement. And then on the other hand, we have suggestions for a fundamental shift in the structures that actually provide us with governance today. We have questions on whether a top-down kind of approach to change in governance might work, or a bottom-up approach with a lot more digital and sort of social media kinds of voices coming through. Whatever approach we decide to take will not be for us to decide, in fact. It will be for the community, for the public, for the widest range of voices possible. And hopefully the Global Foundation, in launching a discussion paper on this topic, will be able to mobilise more and more voices to participate in this conversation, more voices than we have here today. And yet I think we've made a great start to the conversation today.
Greg, Elaine, Emily, Jacinta. Greg, Elaine, Emily, Jacinta, mic's on, and thank you, Jacqueline. Join me in